Hi, and welcome to the Lensrentals Podcast, where we talk about images and the people who make them. I'm Roger Cicala, the founder of Lensrentals.com. Good morning, I'm Roger Cicala. Welcome to the Lensrentals Podcast. I'm joined today by two people who know more about their stuff than I do, so this will be fun for me. I'm going to learn some things. Joey Miller is here. He is our head technician of troubleshooting and also assesses all the damaged equipment that comes back. So he's got a lot of knowledge about used equipment in general.
I know how things break.
You do indeed. And Connie Candabat runs our used sales arm. So a lot of Lensrentals equipment that survives rental and that we think is good enough to sell goes through her and is then resold as used. So she's got a lot of experience on selling used equipment and therefore buying used equipment. She knows what sells well and what comes back because it doesn't stick. So we're going to talk today about how you can save some money buying used and bargain lenses and how you can save some money by not buying used and bargain lenses. Because for every person who gets a great deal, there seems to be a person who feels totally ripped off.
Yep.
And today I think we've got a lot of ground to cover, so we're going to get right to it. I'm going to start with how do you not buy a used lens, because this is the path that I see a lot of people go down and just feel ripped off or used. So Joey, what do you got first?
Don't think that magic bargains exist everywhere. Like that's the main thing. Used gear, it's used, so expect it to be like you don't go to buy a used car and thinking it's like a brand new car. Like that's just not the way it works.
Right, but you can get a really good used car.
You can get a good used car if it's gently used, low miles, and there are ways to find used gear the same way.
Right.
So.
And I think the magical part too is you got to look, are your expectations reasonable for used gear?
Right.
Because if you're going to peer into it with a bright light and look for dust, it will be there.
Absolutely.
If you're going to examine the covering of it and look for a scratch, it will be there. If you're going to look and see if the box is dented, it's probably going to be.
Yep.
And if those things are not okay with you, you probably don't want to buy used.
Right.
Absolutely.
Connie, give me another thing that you see people get burnt on with used equipment.
Basically, anything that a lot of people tend to have in their head that is super important, but tends to really not be.
I think for me, one thing I'll look for is, have you got a scratched lens?
Oh, yeah.
Because I know the price is going to be much lower,
yeah.
and it's going to work just fine for my purposes. One other thing that I think needs mention is somebody somewhere, Joe Schmo, has a $300 lens, and it's just as good as somebody else's $1,800 lens, and therefore I'm going to get a $300 lens that's going to be that good too.
Law of averages says no.
Yeah. And I think if you're going to go down that path of I'm going to shoot copy after copy till I get a good one, your time is not very valuable.
Oh, no.
I'm on my sixth copy, and none of them are what I expected. And it's
Right.
because the sample variation on that $300 lens is going to be high.
Absolutely.
And then one other thing that I do think is important is try not to read copy, advertising copy.
Oh, it's all bullshit. It's all bullshit. It's all hype.
Now, that would be 100%, Joey. Is it 100% bullshit?
It's 1,000%.
Connie, you have anything to add to that?
No. Yeah, that's
if you've ever been around the manufacturers, or at least the U.S. offices or whatever, it's interesting to see who writes copy. They're not photographers.
No, they never are.
And then you get these dreamy, Shakespearean soliloquies about improving your self-esteem by a lens, and it just it isn't there. All right, so let's talk about things that you can do to find good bargains. Connie, you deal with people every day looking for a good bargain. So tell me some things that you think are good things that people should consider.
Well, one of the big obvious ones that I'm assuming Joey will probably back me on this is not going for that super high-end L series or basically the big lens that everybody's shooting with. If you go for that, either a prime that's cheaper or a mid-range by a third party that's a lot of times they're phenomenal lenses. especially nowadays. I mean, Sigma's putting out phenomenal options that are very comparable to Pro Series lenses, and they're
Tamrons out there that
so
are
much
awesome
cheaper.
too.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going for the 2.8 zooms or the 1.4 primes, those are in high demand, and it's simple economics: higher demand, higher price.
Absolutely.
But there, like you said, there are tons of bargains out there. If you don't need 1.4, like say you want 1.8,
Right.
there's tons of 1.8 primes that
Super
on the
cheap.
used market are even cheaper. Like the Nikon 35 and 85 1.8s are excellent. I use them for weddings all the time. The Tamron 35 1.8 is one of the sharpest things we've ever seen.
And those are dirt cheap.
Super cheap. Even Sigma's come out with a couple of, well, if you want the 1.4s, Sigma's are the best way to go because they're all cheaper than the Canon and Nikon brands.
Sometimes the size is an issue.
Yeah.
And again,
Depends
that's
on
where you do
what
your
you're using.
research
Yeah.
because,
Right.
Connie, have you seen people send things back going, I didn't realize it was so huge?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. We've
That's
got a
what
lot
she
of
said.
people.
Did I set that up? Or what?
Absolutely. Yeah. So that's probably one of our biggest returns is expectation of a lens, not really doing the research to understand size, compatibility with their own equipment, different things like that.
I've definitely had people call in and ask me to can you go measure this lens
Yeah.
and send me a ruler measurement? Like, yeah, that's fine.
Or you could look it up on the internet.
I was
but
going to
either
say
one,
it's
yeah.
on the internet. But
Exactly.
Yeah,
And then I usually try and give them a comparison item, it's like the size of 3 Pepsi cans stacked or something,
Yeah. But I think that will you measure it for me? My first thought is always, do they think it shrunk? I mean, it's like every place you go has got those dimensions out there, but no. I think that's real important. My own experience was I was shooting high quality f2.8 zooms and somebody gave me a 1.8 prime and I was just blown away by it. It was better.
Oh, yeah.
It was just definitely better. And I think people don't realize what a big step up that can be. An f1.8 prime stopped down to f2.8 is often the sharpest lens you can find.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Plus, you've got that stop and a third of headroom.
Yeah.
You need it. So
Right. And then the number of people, this is my favorite thing, the number of people who own a 7200 f2.8 that they use as a 200 f2.8. It just boggles my mind.
God.
And carrying that big, huge thing around all day. And it's really a prime to them. They've never shot it at another focal length.
Absolutely.
All right, let's talk about third-party lenses because that's a big, broad group. It's filled with companies we've never heard of who are making the best lens ever for $55. It's also filled with some really reputable companies who are making really good bargain lenses. So, Joey, you mentioned Sigma, and I mentioned Tamron. Most of their lenses are pretty good. Connie, anything else you want to throw out there that you really like?
Takina is a great one.
Yeah, they make some good lenses too.
They actually make some really decent zooms, and
Yeah.
they're very, very popular. So getting those at a good deal is actually a little on the hard side because people know
People
they're
know
great.
the secrets.
Yeah.
Well, give me some names of lenses that you find that are good bargains that you think are often found at good prices and are excellent lenses.
Definitely both the Tamron 35 1.4 and 1.8. Those are both great.
Yeah, that 35-1.4, I don't know if you can find used very often yet.
Yeah, not really. And the 45 is nice too.
It is. It's a good lens. Connie?
Well, depending on your use, the f4 versions of zoom lenses, like the Canon 24-70 f4, what's the Takina with the f4? Is it the 11-16? That one's a 2.8, right?
That's a 2.8, yeah.
Yeah.
Is it so 12 to 20?
12 to
12 to
24.
yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good lens. I like that better than the 11-16 is not one of my favorite lenses.
It's old, but it's still great.
Yeah.
I still recommend. Oh, the 11 to 20 is the newer version of that. 11
Okay,
to
11-20. Okay. I like the if you can find them, and again, there are not a lot of used ones. The Sigma 28 and 40 Arts are among the best primes I've seen.
Yeah.
Big lenses, though. You don't buy it if
Yeah.
you're not ready to carry
Right.
it.
I mean, for me, 40 is my favorite focal length. So
And most people don't realize the Sigma 28 is actually one of the smallest of the Sigma primes. It's really not large.
right.
One other thing I think we need to touch on, though, is when you buy these third-party lenses, you're buying used. You have to consider you may need to get it serviced. Depending on where you are geographically, that can be an issue. Now, in the U.S., I think there's some generalities, but I don't want to apply them to other countries. But we know Sigma's got good service in the U.S. Tamron seems to also. Connie, you have to do a lot of sending back and forth to service for touch-ups.
Well, I can tell you the big one that's really, really hard to work with and basically non-existent is Nikon, which is why we unfortunately have a hard time moving them, but they're very hard to work with. Canon is great to work with. Sigma is great to work with.
I think Micro Four Thirds is often difficult too, aren't they?
Oh, especially
They definitely can
Voigtlander.
be.
Voigtlander doesn't
Yeah.
even have, you can't fix it. You can't get a part for it.
Leica's hard to work with just because of the international traveling.
Yeah, we used to have, I don't know if it's still 6 months. It used to be 6 month turnaround
With
for
Leica.
Yeah.
But the good thing is a lot of Leica service is now free.
Ah, okay. So there's a good positive point.
They started doing that. We found that out recently. We had something come back. I can't remember what it was. Maybe a 75 Noctilux or something that a dude just destroyed. And we sent it in, and they repaired it free.
Wow.
That's pretty
It's
nice.
like part of their marketing now is just to
Well-
offer free repairs on digital bodies and new lenses.
I think one other thing to talk about, just kind of to summarize these, is don't get hooked in a brand thing. Like this brand's all good, this brand's all bad. Every brand's got some real dogs. Every brand.
Every
Absolutely.
brand.
Yeah.
And not every brand. Most brands have some really good lenses. So kind of that was good overview of, what are you looking for? What are you looking to avoid? But where you buy is the next step. And there's a lot of options out there. Joey, you've probably bought on every option there is.
Every single one, including us.
Yeah,
I've even
so-
bought from us.
What do you think?
If you're buying online, the most reputable places are places that are also like known quantities. Like KEH is great. Adaram and B&H Used are also great. Us, we're great.
Yeah, we have used sales arm. If you don't
I mean,
know. Yeah.
in addition, besides just working here, like we inspect everything so many times all the time. So at least you know what you're getting, and we can like look up a history for you and everything.
And I think with all of those places, as you mentioned, if you buy it and you open up, you don't like it, you send it back and they refund
Right.
you.
Exactly. Like those they have return policies.
You pay a little bit more for that, but that's a nice policy to have.
You do.
Right.
Where it gets real dicey is eBay and Facebook Marketplace and Craigslist. I have bought from all of them, and I have regretted them. But I've also found some really cheap deals
Right.
that did turn out well.
Would you call that a dice roll? You're either going to get a little cheaper or you're going to spend a lot more, and it probably evens out.
Yeah,
in
and the
long run.
odds are definitely stacked against you.
Yeah,
Like,
well.
definitely.
Now, I will say eBay actually offers buyers and sellers a lot more protection these days. So
Yeah.
and you've got a return window to deal with and everything. So it's like this happy little medium between Craigslist, Facebook, whatnot.
Yeah, especially
and
if you're going
the
through
others.
PayPal.
Yeah, absolutely. PayPal's a great option.
Yeah, the
really is.
meetup part of Craigslist can get a little scary too.
Yeah.
I've definitely bought stuff out of the trunk of somebody's car from Craigslist in a dark
You're a
parking lot
brave
at
soul.
night. Like, but I got this really nice Bogan heavy duty tripod for $50. So whatever.
Well, and I will point out, because this is not widely known, I know people who bought stuff on Craigslist that they know was stolen when they bought it. And,
yeah.
They pretend they don't know, and the guy selling it pretends it's not, and everybody does that. If the original owner ever shows up, he gets it back and you don't
Yep.
get reimbursed.
That's right.
And I say that because we have done that with some stolen cameras where they've shown up because somebody started using them. We've gone and gotten them, and sorry, shouldn't have bought it that way because it was ours. And as long as we got proof of ownership, you lose it. So
Yeah, we recently just found one of our lenses on eBay.
yeah. But basically, if somebody bought that lens on eBay, we could go to their house with a police officer and take it back.
Yep.
Okay. Well, going on the buying used lenses things, the other place I found bargains is the version 2 or 3 came out, and the version 1 was really pretty good.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't tell you the number of people who sold their Canon 7200 2.8 IS Mark II because the IS Mark III came out, consisting of a new paint job.
Oh, suckers born every minute.
Yeah, and-
apologies to any of you who actually bought that. I'm sorry.
Well, it's a good lens, and if I was buying one, I'd buy it. But I would like sell my IS2 for the IS3. But people did, and there were IS2s that weren't that old that could be bought for a song.
Well, then the market was saturated and the price dropped on it
Yeah.
drastically.
Yeah, so there were some great bargains there, and you've got the same lens. You get some spray paint, you can pretty much catch right up. One of the, not quite the same, but when Nikon came out with the new 24-70 2.8, The old one was really good too.
Yeah.
The new one had some advantages and some disadvantages, so there was some bargains to be made. There's that group of people that are going to buy the new one every time.
Every time.
Yeah.
I mentioned it earlier, but I go out looking for used stuff. Connie's gotten emails from me. You got any really beat up X, Y, or Z? Because that's where, you can get it for half the used price of a good looking one.
Uh-huh. Yep.
So what stuff do you look for that I like this kind of defect because the price has dropped and it's still great?
One of my favorite, and that I realize a lot of people will probably think I'm crazy here, but are glass scratches. 99% of the time, they don't impact images. If you're buying from a good company, then they're going to map it and tell you where it flares, so you can decide whether or not it's going to ever impact your images. Most of the time, it's not, because it's only flares at f8 or 11, and
Especially if you use hoods, it's probably not going to flare ever.
Yeah.
And that's you get that f1.4 prime that's used going for $1,100-$1,200 with a front scratch that's now $800, and you're going to shoot it wide open, you're never going to notice it.
And there are so many people that just run away. As soon as they see glass scratch, they run away. So those products tend to sit, and the price just keeps dropping. So they're always a great buy.
Yeah, my personal collection is largely glass scratched. So.
Oh, yeah.
The other part of it is kind of like buying the used car. If I get that lens and I buy it with a scratched front element, it's not going to drop any more.
No.
That's the thing that I might sell in 2 years for what I paid for it.
Yep. Yep. Especially as companies raise their prices on everything else as we go. I did that with I had a Nikon 2470. I bought it for $1,600, and 4 years later I sold it for $1,600.
Right. It's good rental fee there. What else do you see, Connie, that you would jump on?
Dings. There's all sorts of cosmetic damage that isn't relevant to anything. A ding in the filter ring, a cracked index scale. Those are things that people automatically see and assume there was major impact that caused that, but that's just not the case. The outside barrels of the majority of these lenses are pretty
Scraped
easy. Yeah. So, just because you read that on there doesn't mean that there's actual impact damage, and it's a great buy.
I think we'll talk about it a little bit later as to what to be aware of, but I'm going to differentiate a scratch, a scrape, and a dent.
Oh, yeah.
Dents can be fine, but if you buy a lens with a dent in it, you want to check out the mechanicals and opticals really good, because some of those look like they still work fine, but they've been optically jarred, or there's now a catch in the zoom ring. So scraped or scratched, I don't care about. The dent, I don't mind as long as everything else is okay, but I check that one a little more thoroughly.
It depends on the lens. Like for me, a lot of what I buy is vintage stuff anyway.
Well, yeah.
So if it's like an old brass lens and it's got a ding in it, that's fine. Yeah. That's totally fine. It's not going anywhere.
Exactly. This is not where we're going to go this time, because we're going to talk about buying used cameras later, but one of my great bargains out there for me, if a camera has an HDMI port that's been pulled off the board,
Oh, yeah.
I don't use HDMI. I'm not a video guy.
Yep.
They're nearly worthless. You can buy them for half price. And I pull cards out and put the cards in my computer, so I don't care.
Right.
I don't do much in the way of monitored shooting. If you can find one of those, that's a great bargain.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. My other favorite is dust.
Yeah.
People are like, oh, it's so dusty, it's going to just screw up my image. No.
No.
Yep.
Nothing, no dust you've ever seen ever in your life inside a lens is probably ever going to show up. With very, very few exceptions.
We've probably carried 20,000 lenses for 12 years. I've seen not a dust, but a speck, one of which was a spider.
I was going to say your spider lens.
The spider did show up if you stopped it down and focused close.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a spider.
And it was a giant blob. It wasn't even
Yeah, you couldn't see it was spider, but you could see there was a black
something
thing
there.
in it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it can happen, but the rarity is amazing.
I would say 99% of every call I've gotten where someone says, there's dust in your lens and I'm seeing it in my images, 99% of them they're using a wide-angle lens and their sensor is dirty.
Yeah.
Stop down.
Stop down.
Yeah. So that's We're never going to fight that battle. I give up on that. But yeah, I love me a dusty lens. Give me a dusty scratch lens and, pay me to take it off your hands.
Absolutely.
What about wheeling and dealing? Connie, do you ever get anybody wheeling and dealing?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. No, I don't. Yeah, we have a lot of people who, just reach out because they want to lowball everything. They want the best lens at the cheapest price that is not a reasonable request. But yeah, I mean, there's always the option to wheel and deal on some level. I mean, even if it's a tiny percent.
Well, I know you wheeled and dealed with me once, but I had the fortuitous thing of knowing you had like 8 in stock, and I was like, "Give me a great price on a crappy one," and you did. And I suspect if somebody else had called and said,
yeah, we look at everything. I mean, quantity, how long the gear's been sitting. If they're previous customers, we're always willing to help someone out.
Yeah. I think that's a reason. You're not going to find that too much on eBay.
No,
you probably will on Craigslist, though.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I guess some eBays you can put a bid in. Sometimes that works.
Yeah, sometimes they'll have like or best offer and you make an offer.
Right,
I've done that
exactly.
plenty of times.
Okay, we're going to take a little break and hear some interesting stuff from people other than us for a minute. And then we're going to come back and talk about the bewares, the things to not do or to watch out for when you're buying used gear. And now, Lens Rentals brings you a meditation moment. Close your eyes. Lean back and listen to my voice. You feel yourself getting sleepy. Relaxed. Drifting on a cloud. You love this podcast. You want to give this podcast a 5-star rating. You want to write a positive review of it and even subscribe to it. You know that will bring you a feeling of joy and contentment. When I count to 3, you will wake up refreshed and go straight to the review page. 1, 2, 3. Okay, let's talk about things to beware of, because there are some things out there that everybody's kind of worried about. There's a lot of other things I don't hear anybody worried about, and I think they're bigger issues. So who wants to start?
Sure.
The enthusiasm just bubbles over. Joey needs more coffee.
Going back to what I was saying about the known places like B&H and Anorama and KH and us, in a lot of instances, you can purchase an additional warranty through them. Mm-hmm. Especially like refurbished units will often come with a manufacturer warranty if you're going that route. Check for available warranties.
Yeah.
And, some of those companies have warranties that are just lifetime warranties. That's really rare, but some of them do. But sometimes that only applies to like U.S. copies, not gray market copies.
Right.
So just, again, do your research. If you can find places that do that, it's almost always worth the money because usually those extended warranties are pennies on the dollar. So,
yep.
Well, and the reality is, I mean, even if you find a great deal somewhere that doesn't offer a warranty, you can buy warranties from other places. I think, Square Trade offers warranties. You can buy them from B&H, Amazon, wherever.
Even eBay has some of that.
Yeah.
You could just go online and buy a warranty, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. Now, you link the customer up with that when we sell them something.
Right, we do. Mm-hmm, we do. And one of the things you do need to look at when you're looking at warranties is kind of reading those terms and conditions. A lot of them are basically middlemen, that you're not sending it to them and they're repairing it. You're sending it to them. They're a middleman. They send it off to a service center. So you're going to have gear out of pocket for a while. That's something you need to think about on the front end.
I think we've usually seen the repairs are done well, but not promptly.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
I think our normal turnaround we hear from customers is like 60 to 90 days.
Yeah, well, Connie, you have a big advantage, though, because we have a repair department. So a lot of stuff we give our warranty on, and then they go to the other. And that gets repaired here, and we're fast.
Yeah, we're awesome.
Unless we don't have parts, and then we're slow. And that's a real thing. Again, it goes back to we talked earlier. Some brands you can buy parts for. You can fix it yourself. We can fix it. Your independent repair shop can fix it. Some brands, there are no parts, and they're not going to be able to do a damn thing for you.
Yeah, and when buying used gear, that's extra important because if it's too old, there won't be any parts out there.
Yeah, and go over that, Joey, because basically it's 5 years after they stop production that they have to have parts.
That's right. Especially for the big houses like Canon and Nikon. You can sometimes find parts sitting in a bin on a shelf at like a third-party place. Like we've had that happen at Midwest Camera and things like that where they're like, oh, we actually do have that part. It's rare.
Yeah.
But
we actually do sometimes.
Yeah, we do that sometimes
we have
too.
our own. But the thing that really is, when you talk used gear, a given lens often breaks the same way. And so when you go thinking, I'll buy another broken one and get parts from that, it's probably broken the same way. I know for a while we had Canon 51.0s that were legacy. There were no parts. Every one of them got retired with a burned out focus motor because there were no more focus motors, and you couldn't buy another one.
Well, except for the one that was shattered out front.
Yeah, we had the one we had one out of like 7 we could buy. We used that motor, and I think it burned out too. So.
Oh, totally.
And that's a good point to think about. You know, Joey buys legacy lenses; they last 100 years. They're all mechanical. That's cool. You can take them apart, re-lube them, and
those were built to last.
Yeah, but when you get electronics don't last forever, and when the parts aren't available, I had somebody the other day. They saw a great deal on a Canon 200mm f1.8. It's a great lens. But when the focus motor burns out, it's a great ashtray. There's just nothing you can do with it.
You can maybe manual focus it. Maybe.
Some of them you can. Some of them focus through the motor, so you may not.
Right.
So that's just something to think about. Some legacy lenses. I know super telephotos tend to be in that thing because you can get a working good optically super telephoto lens for a couple of grand instead of 10 grand. As long as you understand it's going to last as long as it lasts.
Yeah. Yeah.
One thing I've seen people do and not do, to my surprise, is I see this on forums all the time because I'm kind of a forum warrior. And it's like, I bought this lens from, Lens Guru God, and within 24 hours wanted to send it back. I didn't like it, and he won't take it back, and blah, blah, blah. It's a real simple thing to start an email trail going, I do want 24 hours to inspect it. Now, most places, like we give 3 days, I think, and I think all this, the brick and mortar places do. But the guy on the forum or the guy on eBay may or may not, and you can always ask on the front end for a 24-hour inspection period. He may say, okay, but you send it back at your shipping. That's a reasonable deal to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
With Craigslist, you're going to pick up a lens. And it's a simple thing, too. Tell the person, I'm going to bring my camera. I want 30 minutes to check out the lens with you in there before I complete the purchase. Because I've seen people show up and they're going like, no, now. Which should be a red flag. That,
Run away.
May not, yeah. But those things are so simply done on the front end and leave an email trail rather than making assumptions. So I think that's always a good thing to be aware of, that you are going to get a chance to look at it and return it if you don't like it.
Yeah, trust but verify.
Yep.
Exactly. And half the time when those arguments happen, it is well, if you had asked me, but you didn't. And that's always an issue. The other thing, if you're buying online from an individual, actually if you're buying online, I tend to take pictures of the box and open it and take pictures. It has happened where there seem to be very legitimate disagreements about how it was when it was sent and how it was when it arrived.
That's a very valid point. That actually has happened to us multiple times where a customer has said, this came to me like this, and you get it back from the return, and it's very obvious that there was impact damage. And the odds of the exterior packaging having zero impact damage, but the product inside having impact damage are very, very low.
Well, I will say the way we pack, that's true.
Yes.
But I've seen lenses arrive in a box full of peanuts, and if you've ever done that, the lens settles to the bottom of the box, and one side has no peanuts. So
or no packing material at all.
Right. So
yeah. I mean, this is purely anecdotal evidence, but I know in my experience, the sellers that are very easy to communicate with, volunteer information, tend to be the ones that pack better and tend to be the ones that actually have decent gear.
Yeah. And probably tend to be the ones that took pictures before they sent it so they can go, it's different now.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Because they've probably also been burned.
Yeah. But, I remember the one we saw, Connie, you were here. I don't think Joey was, that the box came in with tire tracks across the top of it.
I remember that one.
And it was sent out as a 12 by 12 and came back as a 12 by 6. None of us were surprised that it was damaged. we've talked about old fully mechanical stuff, but that's not what people are buying now.
No, they're not.
So
More for me.
yeah, I know. But
Supply goes up, prices go down. I get cash in.
you know, one of these days you're going to go on my shelf and go, he's gone now. I want those lenses. I collect old lenses. That's what we're.
You don't think that's been my plan from the beginning?
I figured. I don't use them. I look at them. Joey wants to use them, and he's not allowed to touch them. Okay, so we talked about getting repairable lenses. I think one thing to consider when you're buying any lens is, we talked earlier about the electronics that fail. A lens with IS units, electronic focusing, 14 different electronic things is not going to last as long as Joey's mechanical lens. It probably is not going to last as long as one that's just a plain old autofocus lens. Mm-hmm. And what about age? Do you have any rules of thumb on where you start going with lenses? You mentioned the Tamron 11 to 16, still in production. It was in production when we started Lens Rentals. Mm-hmm. So that lens, you might buy it and it'd be 12 years old. Does that worry you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mostly because of the type of lens. Like that particular lens got recommended by Philip Bloom, so everyone bought them and everyone was using them as like this huge workhorse. So if you find them, they're probably heavily used, especially a 12-year-old copy. Mm-hmm. So it's probably seen.
Yeah, but I will say the whole age thing is kind of a slippery slope. I mean, you know, what you're talking about is probably more of a valid point to ask about and to look into, the whole concept of how much was this used, because someone could have a product for 5 or 6 years and it sat on a shelf 90% of the time. That's...
If it was one of my lenses, that's probably true.
Right. Well, and if, you know, like if I were looking at a 10-year-old Zeiss lens versus a 10-year-old Rokinon lens,
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
both manual focus, both fully mechanical, that Rokinon is shit.
Yeah.
And that Zeiss is probably great. Because
that's a good point to make, though, because construction quality differs a lot.
Mm-hmm. Like, I would trust that Zeiss to take a drop here and there. And I would also trust the person that bought it, spent so much on it, they probably kind of babied it.
Yeah.
That's a really good point. And, you know, we see that, too. For those of you who don't know, we rent our gear for 2 years, and then it goes over to Connie and is sold. Depending on that lens, Connie may get all of them, mm-hmm. or she may get 20% of them because 80% have already failed. Mm-hmm. And that's a real thing.
Yeah,
and that difference, there's a subtle thing if you want to kind of check. If you, we're not going to put this out as like a blog post or something, but if you go to the lens rental site and you look at how much does it cost to rent this thing, and you raise your eyebrows and go, that's really expensive for that thing. One of the examples I remember years ago, we had several 300-2.8 lenses. One of them cost half as much as the other. They both rented for the same price. There's a reason for that. The reason is we're not getting any money back on the cheaper one. It doesn't live that long. It has more repairs. So when you see things that go, they don't have many and they're really pricey to rent, that may be because they just don't survive.
That's
And
a red flag for
sure. Buying one, well, it's not likely to survive long either. That's still a good idea. I mean, some people, if I was a cinematographer and I needed a fixed focus length lens and I could get a Zine for $400 or a Zeiss for $4,000, I'd buy the Zine and do the shoot and hope it lasted after that. And if it didn't, that's okay.
It's a disposable.
Yes.
You have to look at what you're
especially based
getting.
on the conditions you're shooting in.
Right.
You know,
if I was going to blowing
about.
sand in the desert, I'm not going to take my Zeiss.
Exactly.
You know? But I think that's something that people have to be realistic. We're almost going full thing to the magical thinking. You can get that great bargain as long as you expect it to perform as it's likely to perform.
Right. Another thing on the build quality with age, high-end lenses, like your Pro Series lenses, your 2.8 zooms, your high-end primes, those are built to last because the people that are buying them are the pros that are using them day in, day out. So an older version of that, I would trust a little more if it looked cosmetically good, because that means that person probably didn't treat it like shit. And it's built better than the cheaper one, or the cheaper version that may look pristine, but you know, if it's the same age, I don't know what's going to hold up.
Well, I think your point earlier was really good. The person who buys the $4,000 lens probably takes really good care of it.
Yeah.
You know, buying a used Mercedes, you tend to get a pretty good car. So I think that's really a worthwhile thing to consider. All those things being said, I think we've talked about the fact that you can save on average a good amount. Connie, my guess is that buying a used lens, you're about 60% of new price. Is that a good rule of thumb?
It kind of
plus or minus 20 maybe?
Yeah, but yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think that for a lot of people, if you don't think about that, that means basically you can have 3 lenses versus 2.
Mm-hmm.
And really, really worthwhile. I like the points we made earlier. There's some great bargains out there for next to nothing, and it's a great way to try. Say if you're a zoom shooter and you want to try a prime, that 1.8 prime is really, really a good bargain.
Yeah.
I'm going to talk a little bit before we go about looking at that used lens you purchased, and we obviously talked about the cosmetics, and we don't care. But when you get a used lens in your hands, there's some basic things you should do. Even if you're not a lens tester, you need to take a couple of pictures because sometimes the optics are not up to snuff. Mm-hmm. There's almost no way you can take one lens and go, this is not as sharp or as sharp as it's supposed to be, unless you have a comparison. But you can certainly go the left side and the right side are different. That's not okay. That's a quick and easy test. I always tell people, make sure you do the manual zoom and focusing. And if it's there, aperture control, because sometimes people don't. They just autofocus.
Lock switch is a big one, too.
Lock switch is a big thing. Yeah, those break in a lot of cases. And the other switches on the body, the AF/MF button.
When you're testing those zoom and focus rings, though, make sure you're tilting the lens in different directions because
Very
sometimes
good
things
point.
can shift.
Yeah, some lenses that are very smooth if it's pointed at the ceiling or not at all smooth if it's pointed horizontally. And that catch and focus or catch and zoom, that usually indicates damage. They should be smooth. The resistance should be similar throughout the range.
Right. If it's like a real jam, it could just be a loose screw inside, but it could also be something broken.
Right.
Well, and if it's a loose screw inside and you're not capable of opening that lens up to fix it, it's going to the repair shop. So, and I think usually it is. That's what we've seen a lot. It's a loose screw or a bent cam or something to that effect. But if you feel that catch anywhere in the lens, with a couple of exceptions, there's a couple lenses that tend to catch where zoom rings change. There's one Nikon, it may be the old 2470, that caught it like
50-ish,
50-ish,
35-ish, like right at the turn.
And that's just the barrels are both turning at that one point. But those are important things to look at. IS units, Joey, I always heard this. I bought this lens, and the IS sounds funny. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Older IS units are louder than newer IS units. That's just the way it is. But if you start to hear them like stuttering or clicking or any other way not making like kind of a smooth vibration sound, they're probably failing. They're probably going to just crap out on you.
Yeah. And looking through the viewfinder or on live view while the IS is working, you may see a little bit of tiny jitter, but you shouldn't see a jump or a stick.
Yeah.
Exactly. But another thing to keep in mind is the different brands do vibration reduction differently.
Right.
So a Tamron isn't going to look the same as a Canon.
Or sound the same.
Or sound the same.
Right.
Same with the Sigma. Those three will all look different. And I've had people call and be like, this doesn't stabilize like my Canon IS, whatever. I'm like, yeah, no, that's right.
Yeah.
That is correct.
That's because patents.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else you can think of that people need to look at when they get a piece of equipment?
Well, I think talking about, exactly how to test is a good thing. Shooting a brick wall is a great way to, tell,
exactly.
Left from right side being, different or.
Not everybody has an ISO 12233 chart at home.
Right.
Brick walls are good. And focal lengths. Don't just test at the 12 feet where your chart is. Take it outside, take some shots.
Right. And don't just check on both ends of the zoom. Check in the middle, too.
Right.
Absolutely. So that's all
the full
important
aperture
stuff.
range.
Right. And, if you have a camera capable of it, try autofocus in live view first because that'll give you a more accurate, you don't have time to sit there and do an autofocus micros adjustment if you have 30 minutes to check a lens out.
Right.
Do it in live view. That'll eliminate your focus errors mostly and give you a more accurate representation of what you're shooting. So
That's quick and easy. One other thing on the focus part, I always flip to autofocus and just focus on something near, focus on something far, focus on something near that fast, because you do want to hear the focus motor go through its whole range. And you want to get an idea of how fast it moves. That's not a sign of damage. Some focus is slow, and if you're buying this lens to go sport shoot, that may not be enough for you.
And sometimes a lens that should be fast that is slowing down is a sign of it dying.
Yes. Screechy autofocus, another thing to run away from. Run away, run away.
Very common in
Well, yeah.
certain brands.
Well, actually, in certain eras, there was a couple of years where you started to see them start to screech, and then they made some changes, and the different ones are, new ones are different. That's often fixable, but do you buy a used lens because you want to go get it fixed? No.
No. Unless the deal is so good, you can get it fixed and still pay less.
That's true, and that does happen.
One last thing that I can think of is knowing whether or not it's typical for that lens to slip when it's pointed down. There's a lot of lenses that we see that everything tests absolutely normal, but if it's one that's supposed to not slip and it does, that's indicative of an
You're
issue.
basically saying when the lens is pointed at the ground.
Zoom creep.
Right, zoom creep,
Yeah, a lot of people have complained about that on lenses that don't have any sort of lock. Like they're just going to do that, and with age they're going to get worse.
Right.
That's just something you should live with. But some lenses have zoom locks. Some lenses, some of the old, actually even some of the newer, longer zooms, like the Canon 28-300 and the older 100-400 and Sony FE 100-400, they have a friction lock. And a lot of people don't know how to use those. They don't know how they work. Like on the Canons, it's a split ring. And so you hold the focus ring and you turn this friction ring separately.
Anyone who hasn't used that doesn't know how to use it.
Exactly.
That is so counterintuitive.
Exactly. And we've had so many people call in, like even on rentals, like I can't get this zoom to zoom, or it won't lock in place because they don't know how to do it. So try and familiarize yourself with that. There's tons of videos on YouTube about it.
Or call and ask.
Or call and ask, yeah.
Yeah, the assumptions are what always come back and bite you,
Yeah.
and I see that constantly.
But yeah, zoom creep is a thing that people look for, and it is. Most lenses just do it. Like it's not usually a problem.
Yeah.
A related thing is on extending barrel zooms. When the barrel is extended, some of those lenses have a little bit of jiggle, a little bit. But if the barrel is loose, as in rattly, then you probably have a problem.
Right, and by a little bit.
Millimeter or two.
Some of them are a little more, and it's a little disconcerting, but they're all like that.
Yeah, that's very true. And for more testing, I wrote a blog post years ago. It's a little dated, but still very good. It's difficult to find. You have to Google how to test a lens.
Oops.
But it basically...
We can link it in the show notes.
Yeah, we can link it in the show. It basically goes with some images into a little more detail than this about how to really evaluate a lens and see if it's a good used lens or not. Anything else you guys want to throw out afterwards, other than we probably need to come back and talk about cameras one day?
Yeah. A lot of people like to buy cinema lenses used because a lot of them are super expensive.
Right.
And there's some, repair houses will buff out scratches in the front elements.
That is very true. That is such a good point.
If you see a front element with no coating at all, it's probably been buffed, and that is a very, very bad thing.
They get, if you're talking about a $5,000 lens, it may drop $1,000 with a scratch, and they will polish it out. They've now changed the curvature of the front element and removed the coating. We actually have seen this enough that we have a spectrometer because we can tell if the coating's been buffed because the color cast of the lens will be different. And, you can kind of see that. Most similar lenses, like all CP2s, should have a similar color cast. If you suddenly see one that looks different, run away.
Yes. I mean, if you're polishing the front surface, you're changing the curvature, you've now altered the optical quality of the lens. Like, it's not going to be...
And not for the better.
No. Right.
Yeah. That's a real good point. Not applying to many people, but it's a big deal when it does apply.
Yeah.
And we've sent back a couple of lenses that we bought. Fresh, used, looked perfect. And, no. Let's call it a wrap for today. Thank you both. I appreciate your time.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Roger.
Thanks for listening to the Lens Rentals Podcast. If you have any questions or comments, let us know at podcast@lensrentals.com. Today's quote is from Rachel Morrison. Life is unpredictable, and I feel to some extent, lighting and cinematography should be a reflection of that.